Hello, everyone. Welcome to Aon's Chats from Home. I'm Virginia Brown, our Chief Transformation Officer. I'm so glad you could be here today. Our chat is disabled. Normally, I would want you to introduce yourselves, but we do have the Q&A working, so we'll go that way. Let's see. So I'm glad you all could join us. And as we begin, I just want to respectfully acknowledge that Aon properties are located on land traditionally stewarded by Indigenous people, land steeped in history and tradition as part of the treaty lands and territories of the Anishinaabe and Dakota nations. We acknowledge the painful history of colonization and genocide. We respect and advocate for Native American communities' connection to this land. This acknowledgement is a starting point. It is one part of Aon's work to honor the history of Indigenous communities and invest in the present and future prosperity of Native people. We celebrate the thriving and vibrant culture of Minnesota's Indigenous communities. Now, I know you're all excited to hear from the Resident Services team, but before we do that, I want to start by thanking IMA, our generous sponsor of today's event. We're so grateful for their support to make homes affordable in the Twin Cities and for all of us to gather today. And thanks to all of you for joining. You're also supporting this important work. Together, we're making sure more families can afford their homes. If you'd like to add your support, you can always make a gift at aon.org/donate. You didn't think I wasn't going to ask, did you? Anyway, so here's how this is going to work. I have a list of questions in front of me that were submitted in advance. Thanks so much to those of you who did send some in. After that, I'll feed your questions to Tyler and Billy from the Q&A. So any questions you have during this next hour, just enter them in the Q&A, and I'm going to be reading those. If you're having any technical issues, you can let us know in the Q&A, and I'll try to alert staff to that. Finally, I hope we have time to get to all the questions, but we might run out of time. Any questions that aren't answered, if you make sure to put your name on the questions you submit in the Q&A, we'll make sure that someone from the Aon team follows up with you. So now it's time. Panelists, can you turn on your cameras? I'd like to welcome you. My colleagues Tyler Perrett, Aon's new Vice President of Resident Support, and Billy Brownlee, Resident Connections Coordinator, are here. Welcome, Tyler and Billy. This is your moment to introduce yourselves. Tyler, do you want to go first?
Absolutely. Thank you, Virginia. Hi, everyone. My name is Tyler Perrett. As Virginia mentioned, I'm the new Vice President of Resident Services for Aon. I started June 1st in this role, and I'm also new to Minnesota, which has been exciting. So looking forward to the winter. I've gotten a lot of recommendations from native Minnesotans, so here we go. Yeah, I'm very excited to be in this role. My background is in providing direct services to primarily people experiencing homelessness, but I've done a whole lot of work in affordable housing and am really excited to step into this role and kind of bring resident services up to the scale that it needs to be to respond to the emerging needs that we're seeing in the resident population across our entire portfolio. I think we all know that the world has kind of changed in the past couple of years, and so we're trying to evolve our strategies to meet those challenges. So, but I'm excited to talk more and answer questions, and I'll pass it over to Billy.
All right, thank you, Tyler. I'm Billy Brownlee, Resident Connection Coordinator. I've been with Aon about 3.5 years, and we work closely with the residents to ensure housing stability and self-empowerment. You know, this is what we drive on to self-sufficiency and to strengthen the community. These are things that are well connected to the work that we do. So I'm very happy to be a part of this chat and happy to be a part of helping the residents. So I look forward to the meeting as well.
Love it. Thanks for the great introductions. So fun to be here with you today. And I'm going to start with the first question. What role does resident services play at Aon? Tyler, can you take this one?
Yeah, I'll jump in and then I think it'd be great to hear some of Billy's perspective as well, just on the ground. But yeah, so resident services really kind of is broad at Aon. So we have properties where we enter into partnerships with service providers like YMCA and Simpson and RS Eden. So I help manage those relationships and make sure that we're providing the best level of services possible to those residents. We also have our internal resident services team, which Billy is a part of, the resident connectors, and they're engaged more broadly at properties across the portfolio and really are working in a pretty diverse environment and in providing and connecting people to as many services as possible. The Twin Cities environment has a lot of services available, and so it's a full-time job just to keep aware of what those services are and help people navigate the ways to access those. So that's really what we do. We step in when people are having issues with mental health or substance use or how to pay rent or how to access food programs, and really try to connect those services and make sure that people are getting what they need when they need it.
Great.
Right.
Billy, yeah, what do you think?
Yeah, I can follow what Tyler said. We do work closely with the residents. Some are facing challenges that we like to step in and help. Computers and all these sorts of things that some of the older generation just don't want to grab. So we step in and we kind of help them. We walk through them on how it's done. And, that way we can empower them to be ready to do it themselves in our community room. So we do provide resources and we work with the resident, and we're better together because we want them to be able to come to us with any situation in case, there's another staff not there. We are the conduit to making things happen in unnormal situations. So we work with them, we self-empower them, and we give them the resources that they need. Regardless of what it is, we have unlimited resources to provide our residents. So we just want them to be comfortable, and we want them to feel like it's a home and not necessarily the apartment complex, but we want them to feel like they're at home. So they take care of their home. So we want them to be self-empowered. So we provide all the tools, that's needed to be successful. And thus far, it's been fantastic, with the new leadership we have and the current leadership we have.
That's great. And I love the focus on empowering them. I will also just interject my own lens of we do have sort of an infinite amount of resources to offer them. Like Tyler said, there's so many resources in the community that we can connect people to. We do not have unlimited resources at Aon, just in case anybody misunderstood that. So still feel free to make those gifts at aon.org/donate, because we actually do need your support to run this program. It is almost fully run through charitable donations. So just wanted to clarify that little point. The fundraiser in me couldn't let it go. But I know what you meant, Billy. Billy, what you were talking about was so great. Can you say a little bit more about how does a resident actually get connected with you or one of your colleagues on the resident connections team?
Right. So we want to start with their entry when they get their keys. They're in such a celebratory mood. So we get a chance to walk with the resident and introduce them to the properties and give them information and let them know this is where we're at. These are some of the things we can do. We give them the grand tour of the properties, and I give them I call it the property Bible. We have a book that has resources in it that's very resident friendly. So, I start off with that, and just to give them an idea of some of the amenities around and some of the exciting things within the building and outside in the community that we do play a major role in. And we just want to be approachable, so that when there is a need, that they can be so welcome to come into the office and express, what it is, and we can step up and do everything we can to making this happen. So we are better together, working with the residents. That is always my motto. We are better together, and the residents love to respond. And we just want to be very open and very approachable, and it seems to be working very well. And we've got a great response.
That's great, Billy. Thanks. Well, we've got a question in the Q&A that I'm about to ask, but just a reminder to everyone to put your questions in the Q&A so that we can get Tyler and Billy talking about how their work works. But this one is from a TH. So they're asking about assistance to residents who become more stable in there. I think what the question is when the residents' income goes up and they maybe sort of are making too much money for the program they originally got into the housing for, how does Aon deal with that? How does Aon support the residents through that? Is that something, Tyler, you can answer?
Absolutely. And that's a fantastic question that I think points to what has become kind of the systemic issue that we're dealing with of, we can create programs that will help people get on their feet, but how do we make sure there aren't cliffs or gaps in between those programs, and how do we kind of help people navigate that system when oftentimes even the people that are working in the system don't fully understand the consequences that we're putting out. So yes, absolutely, Aon helps with those transitions, and resident services helps with those transitions. I was just on a call right before I jumped on this, where we were talking about one of those transitions with a service partner agency and somebody who is in this exact situation where they are going to be employed here in the next couple months and anticipate to earn higher than a threshold that would allow them to keep their voucher. And so we're already talking about plans on, okay, how do we make a transition? Is that to another Aon property or another Aon unit? Is it somewhere else that might not be at an Aon unit, but how do we make sure that that person remains successful and stable, and not just falls off the edge of this proverbial cliff because they lost a subsidy that they'd previously counted on? So I think we're actively engaged in those conversations, not just at the individual level and working with residents as they navigate that themselves, but also at the systemic level, talking with continuums of care and other service partners of, hey, what are these gaps, and how do we as a community partner step into the space and advocating, making sure that we're looking collectively at how to reduce those gaps so that that's smoother for everybody.
That's great. We've got another question from Mary and Rick. Can you talk a little bit about what rental subsidies are available and what kind of subsidies we see Aon residents on? I don't know, Tyler, if you want to take that, or Billy.
I do want to jump on it because let me tell you, this has been an education point for me coming from Oklahoma, because the rental subsidies that were available in Oklahoma were almost exclusively limited to federal rental subsidies. And Minnesota kind of has this whole other binder of rental subsidies that are available through state programs, which is really exciting. So we're seeing a lot of diversity in the rental subsidies that are available. We have, standard rental subsidies available at a lot of Aon properties, Section 8. We also have housing support, which was formerly GRH. Now Billy and Virginia, you're going to have to help me because there's just so many. There are some that are dedicated permanent supportive housing through continuums of care and county funding. Help me out here.
Yeah, that is correct. And we do go through the resources with Hennepin County and other agencies to see what's available. And we also look into the individual. Just personally, I had this situation with an individual maybe a year ago, and he had no income. So he and I got to talking, and it winds up, he had a 401k that had been sitting there for 20 years untouched. He had a pension that was already. So we're, and at the end of the day, he winds up getting all of those resources. So we look not only within the state, within the county, but we look outside to see what may be some hidden income with the individuals. In this particular individual, he didn't have any family or anything. So we just tapped into something that we didn't know was there, but we just used that skill just to see, and to widen our options to make sure that we've exhausted everything. And and more times than not, it really works out well. And I do a mentorship with a lot of the residents for that transition that we talked about, because myself, I lived in affordable housing, and as my pay scale increased, I was encouraged by a mentor at Aon to move to market rate. And I thought it was a great idea because I used it because I was struggling. But as I progressed, I wanted someone else to get that bed over there, because I'm doing okay. I'm able to move forward and help others. So we want to keep a mentorship program so that that transition is a smooth transition. And that's our top goal.
Yeah, I think another unit or another subsidy that really Aon is kind of at the forefront of is 811 units, which are specifically targeted to, I think, older folks. And I know we have one of the largest collections of 811 units in the country. And so we're really kind of at the cutting edge of some subsidies as well, of thinking about how they work and providing a lot of feedback to Minnesota Housing and HUD in some of those spaces. So.
Yeah, that's great. And, one of the things a lot of people don't understand about the work that we do at Aon is because there's so many programs, which Tyler said is great. We want all the programs and all the ways to get folks the financial support they need to pay their rent. But it also means Aon has to resource a compliance team that makes sure, because every one of those programs has its own compliance structures. And so we might have 5 different programs just in one building, and each resident has a different sort of set of parameters they have to follow. So it gets quite complex too on the organizational side and on what we have to sort of make sure we're in compliance with. So I know that that's something that Billy and the team work on quite a bit as well. And I know I'm just going to speak for everyone on the call, Billy, when we say it's such an amazing thing to hear about how your journey has progressed. And we're so honored that you live in an Aon property, and I'm so honored that you're one of our team members. And that's what we do this work for. We want to be able to work with folks on that stability path. Okay, so getting back to more questions. We've already been talking about the subsidies that are available to people, but we're just, I don't know, is the pandemic over? We're getting out of the worst of the pandemic, and it was, now 3 years of a lot of difficulty and a lot of job loss among our residents at Aon, people who work in the service industry and who had part-time jobs, lost a lot of hours. And so we know there was a ton of rent support needed. Can you talk a little bit, Billy, about the things you did during the pandemic that were maybe special or different in order to support residents to pay the bills and get their food and whatever else?
Oh my goodness, that was an amazing time. That was something I personally took as a project pandemic. We went through the properties, we provided emergency food shelves because the residents weren't able to get out. So we had the local food shelves come by and we'll set it up and everyone have their masks, take your food and go back upstairs. We also was able to provide information about vaccinations, and we was giving rides if you needed. We was getting groups to get the vaccinations and information and masks. We were just giving masks to everyone who needs them, and we was just making sure everyone understood that now we have to do the hand washing, the mask, and it was something new at the time. So we had an opportunity to understand some of the mental health issues that was going on with some of the residents and provide on-time help for them. At that particular time, it was, they was really seeking people who were looking for mental health. So we got a lot of business cards to pass them around. So that was a tough time, but we were at the properties and the need was at 100. So we provided that 100-point need, and we went to the senior shelters. We made sure that their food shelves, because at the time, during the pandemic and then the unrest, all the stores were burned down. And it was like the perfect storm of things to happen. So that even gave more energy and more opportunity to do more for the residents. And I'm still excited today that some of the residents still tell me today, thanks for helping because no one else came to our property but you. We want to thank you. That means a lot, and that builds that trust. It's that trust in the residents that we want to continue to build. It's just the most important thing is to build the trust. Whether you can get, do exactly what they want or not, they trust that you will give 100% effort. And that's the goal that we want to put out.
Yeah, great. Well, another question, and maybe this one, Tyler, can go to you. What would you say makes resident services different from case management support in how, Billy and the team are working? And then I'd also be interested in hearing a little bit more about what exactly do our partners like RS Eden and Simpson Housing do for Aon residents?
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, so typically the case management support that we see provided by YMCA, RS Eden, Simpson, Touchstone, there's a lot of partners that we have in that space. It starts prior to their engagement with Aon, the residents' engagement with Aon. So usually they'll go meet that resident where they are, either in a shelter or out on the street, and then kind of help them navigate the process into that unit, and then retain case management in post placement in that unit. So it's generally a little bit more intensive, some scheduled meetings on a biweekly or monthly basis, creating some type of stability plan that's documented, usually in HMIS or another form of HMIS is the Homeless Management Information System. I'll get caught up in my acronyms here, and then we'll have other questions populating in the chat about, will you ask Tyler to stop using acronyms? But documenting case plans and really kind of a more intensive engagement. The work that we're doing in the resident connection side is significantly more broad. So resident connections folks don't maintain a dedicated caseload necessarily, but it allows them to be present at several different properties with a lot of different folks and kind of step into the needs that they see at that moment. Engagement is generally a lot shorter period of time. So it could be a few weeks to a few months, and making sure that the resident that they're engaging with gets what they need, connection to the appropriate resources that will provide more intensive work. And then they kind of step back out and kind of look for other residents that might need that assistance.
Cool. So there's a question here from an anonymous attendee. Who's the resident connections coordinator for Greenway Terrace? I'm not sure if we have one there, but maybe in answering that, you could also talk about where would resident connectors be found at Aon properties?
Yeah, so I'll let Billy jump in on this too. He might have Billy's been here longer than I have, so he has a better idea of where people are. Aon has over 60 properties in their portfolio, and I'm still learning those. But one of the things that we're angling towards, we've had limited capacity in our ability to provide resident connection services at our entire portfolio, just because we grew really fast over the past few years. And so we're trying to match the need that exists in resident connections and resident services. So one of our goals for 2023 is to really expand the access to resident connections across our entire portfolio. Right now it exists at about 23 properties. So we're really actively trying to grow that as much as possible, so that every resident at every Aon property would have access to that level of services.
Tyler's correct. Even though the property is not within our little parameter, I get a ticket. Hey, it's on the other side of the state. I'm hopping in my car and go over there, and it's not, it's a whole. So wherever we need it, depends on the situation. If it's LTH, that is my stronghold. Being homeless for 8 years, I really understand and relate to some of the things that they're going through. So, I hear LTH 50 miles away. I'm putting it on my schedule and I'm hopping over there, and I'm going over there because I can understand some of the things that they're going through. And sometimes, it's that comfort of someone knows that you've been through it. So when I get a call, and if it's in my single adult LTH, I got my boots on and I'm running, because the need is not just at one place. It may be at all 59 places. Though I can't be there at one time, I put it on my schedule. I promise I'll get there.
So Billy used another acronym, LTH, which is long-term homeless, which is an official designation for some of our units. And that comes through the funding model. And that means that those units, the way they get built, they're also reserved for people who've experienced homelessness. And Billy, you were talking a little bit about, you have this specialty. Tyler or Billy, you can field this question, but can you say a little bit about what that means and how that operates within the team?
Yeah, I'd love to jump on that. So I think how Resident Connections has traditionally operated has been, Billy would be assigned to 2 or 3 properties, and he'd try to provide the kind of basic level of services that we do to everybody living in those properties. One of the things that we're realizing, especially coming out of COVID, is that the needs for different populations are really different. Sounds simple when I say it out loud, but when you're redesigning programs, it can be a little bit complicated. So one of the things that we're doing is having less geographic focus and more population focus. So Billy and a couple of our resident connections folks are focused on individuals that are transitioning out of homelessness, individuals that might have had recurring instances of homelessness, because they understand the resources needed to stabilize those individuals really well and can help them navigate those resources, sometimes from a very personal experience. And so we also have folks specifically looking at seniors in Aon properties, folks that are trying to age in place, and seniors have very specific level of needs around healthcare and access to different subsidies that are available to that population that might not be available to other folks. So really the skill set needed to navigate those subsidies is different than the skill set needed to navigate subsidies related to people who might have experienced homelessness. And the other population focus that we have right now are families and families with young children, just because there, again, is this whole nother map of resources that are available to that community that might not need to be accessed by the other two. And so we're trying to kind of increase the familiarity we have internally with the resources available in our community so that we can navigate those quickly and effectively.
Great. Well, and to that end, Mary and Rick have another question. They're talking about veterans and that the VA has expanded their contracting with community-based programs, which we are all in favor of. And they're asking, has Aon been able to provide services specifically to veterans?
So they're cheating off my board back here. That's one of my short list to do's is to finish an MOU with the VA here in Minnesota. But we are super excited to work with the VA. I know we have veterans living in Aon housing. We're working on formalizing a partnership with the VA with the new expanded VASH voucher, which, oh man, I don't know what the VASH acronym stands for. Veteran Housing for VA SH, supportive housing, veteran, something, I don't know. I'm not going to get but they expanded that program in the state of Minnesota to include folks who might be outside the federal VASH definitions, which is a supportive housing program federally for veterans. So we're really excited that there might be more individuals who have served in the military that are eligible for those type of subsidies and could be a really great fit for some of our properties in Aon. So we're looking at expanding those resources and already provide some.
Awesome. So a little bit more to the structure of the team. Janet's asking, what is the number of resident connectors per resident population? Is that sort of a formula you use to identify how many Billies we need on the team?
We need a lot more Billies. We need more Billies. We need more Venuses. We need a bunch of resident connectors that we have. If we could clone our resident connections team a couple times, we would. So one of that's something that we're certainly going to be focused on in the next year is how do we reduce that ratio and really think about increasing access to those services? Because right now it's very limited. It's pretty effective at the properties where we're active, but there's other properties where we don't get out there very often. And so we're trying to really increase our capacity at those places to be able to provide the services that we need.
That's great. Well, we've got a question from Becca, and Billy, this one's for you. You mentioned that, you've experienced homelessness and lived in affordable housing. And so wonderful that you're willing to share that part of your personal story. Can you talk more about your teammates and what other kind of personal experiences the RC team is bringing to the job?
Yeah, a lot of experience. We have one of the teammates, she is really good in the Somalian community. There was a big gap in communication there, and she just walked right into that and just did a phenomenal job, at working with the community over at that particular property. And it's been quite a few events over there that's been successful. Again, we have another co-worker that works for me, Rodney. He does a great job in communications and marketing and doing all those kind of things. Marianne, yeah, we have people on our team that has so much experience, so much knowledge of how this works, that when I have a problem, I could easily, call my coworker, hey, how does this go? Do you have any experience in it? Oh, sure. So it's not a lot of situations that we do go through that we're unable to make a difference in. And when it does come to that, then we go to our supervisor, we go to Marianne, we go to Tyler. We're undefeated. when it comes to trying to make sure that this being stable is good. We're able to provide these different kind of experience throughout our team so that, we could assure, being successful, even at the senior properties. Rodney's really good. If he's not there, I can step in. I love the senior properties. So we're like versatile, in our highest point of specialties. So Venus, again, she works very, very well, with some of the senior residents, and some of the things she do, I can't do. I can keep up with her, but we let her hold the baton on that. So collectively, as a whole, as we all put our talents together, we're able to move this thing fast forward and move in this positive direction that we're headed. And if it's things that we're unable to have, again, we go to our upper management, Tyler, and we're 10 for 10.
That's great.
Virginia, I'd love to jump in on that for a second too.
Sure.
I think, the systems that we have in place in regards to housing and funding and even just social healthcare in general are complicated, but they're not rocket science. And what our team is fantastic at, even if they don't know the ins and outs of all these different systems, they are incredible problem solvers, and they are incredibly empathetic for the residents that we have in our units. And when you talk to residents at Aon Properties, when they talk about the people they call when they've got an issue, it's our resident connections folks. They say, well, I'm going to get Billy on the phone because he's going to tell me what I can do. Or I'm going to get Amran on the phone because I trust her that she's going to tell me exactly how it is. And then I can make an informed decision. And so I think that's the secret sauce that makes resident connection special at Aon. Isn't that we have this, deep expertise of the systems that are in play, which we do, but we have folks at the table that will listen to exactly what the issue is that our residents are having and help them walk forward every step of that path.
That's amazing. And those systems change so often that problem solving and being able to adapt and figure it out feels like a huge part of it. So that's really cool to hear. Either one of you can answer this one, I think. Can you list out what are some of the most significant barriers for residents right now that you're finding that they're, requesting support on?
I'll start that if it's okay. The biggest barrier is technology. We have some residents that just refuse to let go. We can go around and do the waltz and they just don't want to let go. So, we have to be more patient in working with them, build that trust even more. So yeah, that's kind of one of the barriers. The second barrier is we want the resident to be self-sufficient. So we want to create activities for them to be part of the property. Still, since the pandemic, a lot of them don't want to come out. They're still locked in. So it's even a barrier just to get them to come down for the food show, because they still under the impression that the pandemic is still here. So it's some of those barriers that we're still dealing with. Another barrier, sometime if there's nobody there, we step in big time. We are the extension of the site team. Site team not there, we are that extension. It's like a new car. It's going to come with a brand new spare tires. You could easily put it on, it's going to do the job just as well until you get a new tire or another tire. But so we want to make sure that these type of barriers don't become something that the resident don't want to don't want to care about. One other barrier, the last one I'll get to is again, electronically, we want them to get in to make a maintenance order. It's a little challenging. They feel that they shouldn't have to go and get on the computer to do that. They're used to getting on the phone, say, hey, my sink is broke. And, you know, they hear the number you have reached, the mailbox is full. They just go berserk. So we want to get these, again, self-empowerment so that you can fill out these orders. You can do these things. I'll do it with you. So those are the only two light barriers that I come across a lot. But working with them, sitting down in the community room, showing them how to get on the computer, a day with me, they got it. It's the internet geniuses.
Tyler, anything to add?
Yeah, I'll jump on two real quick that are more external barriers that I think we're running into. One is just general safety. I think that that's true for a lot of people that live in the Twin Cities. It's just kind of this idea that things are less safe. And I think there's kind of this cultural expectation to view affordable housing as the genesis of some of those safety problems. And really, our residents in affordable housing units want to be partners in that solution. They are just as interested and invested in the safety of our community as anybody else. And I think that that's been a challenge, is how do they effectively engage in those conversations, and how do they be a part of the progress conversations around safety that we're having as a community. The second, if I can remember it right, is rental assistance. There it is. I knew I had two. But many people know that there was a lot of rental assistance available during the pandemic, and that has since fallen off. And so a lot of residents that we're working with are having trouble finding where they can access either other avenues for rental assistance or get back in the habit and the tradition of paying rent. And it's been a challenge. And so that's certainly something we're stepping in and trying to help navigate.
That's great. Thanks, guys. It's funny you brought up sort of safety and security, Tyler, and Janet had asked a question. Can you say a little bit more about what is the general situation for Aon residents right now as it relates to safety, both in the properties and in their neighborhoods, and sort of how are we supporting them through that?
Yeah, I think, safety is one of the more complex and complicated problems that we're dealing with as a community. And again, I'm new to Minnesota, so the safety conversation happening in Tulsa, where I moved from a few months ago, is very different. And so I'm new to this conversation, but what I can say is that internally, we are trying to provide as safe of an environment as possible at every single one of our properties. Sometimes that includes contracted security. Sometimes that includes improving the physical environment around doors and locks and lighting and all that kind of stuff. And sometimes it just includes creating environments where residents can come together and get to know each other and realize that they are a community that can advocate for each other and on behalf of each other for their community safety. But then there's this other bucket that is the external neighborhood environment that Aon really doesn't control. And so we're engaging with community partners, neighborhood associations, other groups focused on that more community safety conversation, and how we can come to the table as a partner with our residents and advocate for a safer environment for everybody living in those spaces.
Love it. Thank you. Another attendee has a question back to the subsidies we were talking about before, specifically about 811 units. If someone were interested in finding a subsidy for a senior person, 811 or something else, who do they talk to? Yeah.
So really, I think that would be a deep visit down the Google train. So I think Minnesota Housing has a lot of information about different types of subsidies on their websites. Also, I'm kind of unfamiliar with exactly the resources that exist, but the Hennepin County Continuum of Care, depending on where they are, will have some resources for that as well, about what kind of the subsidy map is. But it's certainly easier to work it from the direction that you're talking about. If you have a person in mind, kind of what their eligibility might be, and then you find subsidies that match that. It's a lot more difficult to go the other way.
Mm-hmm. Fair enough. So Tyler, we've been talking a little bit about the brass tacks. Can you talk a little bigger about, you've mentioned it a little, but what is your vision for RC? You've been here since June. You haven't quite hit a year, so I know you're still, figuring out where the bathroom and the kitchen is, but what do you see as the future for RC?
Yeah, 147 days, but who's counting? So yeah, I think, Aon is at a really great point. we have grown a whole lot over the past few years. And the whole world is kind of transitioning out of this pandemic environment and into a what does the world look like now? And how are we going to address some of these big issues that have been kind of brought to the fore in the midst of this pandemic conversation? And so I think resident services is really poised to step in and help Aon residents navigate that new world. That is going to include a dramatic increase in the number of resident connections folks at Aon so that we can provide a more robust service to residents living in Aon properties. So I already mentioned, but expanding to all of our properties portfolio wide. We're also trying to find ways to support our service providers that are in the field, like RS Eden and Simpson and Aon and Touchstone and the ones that I've mentioned. I think there's been a lot of things that have been kind of pushed to them during the pandemic. And now we have to figure out how to transition and make that sustainable. Because we've all been operating in emergency mindset for years and months and months, but now years. And we've got to figure out how to ratchet some of that back and make sure that, we're not burning frontline staff out, that we're finding ways that we can operate sustainably and that we can provide the level of care that we need to provide to people that need supportive housing in an effective and efficient and sustainable way. I'm saying sustainable over and over and over because I've seen the burnout that's happening, not just internally on a resident connections team, but externally at these service providers. And we can't afford to lose passionate and good people who are interested in working with populations that need housing supports. We have to figure out how to support them and keep them in those roles. I think the other thing that we're looking at is how to think creatively about pipelines to affordable housing and sustainability once people wind up there. My background, as I mentioned briefly at the beginning, is in people exiting homelessness and transitioning people from homelessness into stable and affordable housing. And I think that tends to be the topic du jour in our communities of how do we get people off the street? How do we get people out of homelessness, which is fantastic. But that road doesn't stop and end once they get keys to an apartment. That road continues much, much far further beyond that. And so how do we kind of be at the table for the conversation and what services are available so that that person never goes back to homelessness again and is in a stable, affordable place as long as they need to be.
Love it. Well, I know that we're all excited for that for your team to get there. So that's really cool to hear. Billy, I'm going to direct this one to you. So if you're working one-on-one with a resident and it seems that they need more support than you or your teammates can provide, maybe something more intensive or specific, what's your process for getting them the help they need?
Yeah, we do come across the situation where, the help we provide is a little bit less than what they actually need. So once we go through the situation and figure out this is what it is, I go to my manager, Mary Ann, and I seek advice. This is what it is, and how can we fix this? Even just yesterday, I asked her that same question. We're in a rock and a hard place. How can I help this individual? Because I'm not giving up. There is something. There got to be something else. And she gave me a list of external support that I didn't think of. And when I did see it, I'm like, oh, that's right. So there are a lot of cases where the work that we do, it needs to be a little bit, even sometimes it takes a licensed professional to do some of the things. We can't give advice as a mental health specialist, but we can refer them to someone else. So we don't give up. We use that as energy to making sure that we make this happen, because when the resident reaches out to us, they trust us. They trust us to listen, and they trust us to know that we're going to try to do the best that we can to help them, because a cry out for help is something I never turned a deaf ear to, because I cried out for help, and someone listened to me and gave me a chance. They vouched for me. So I'm doing that throughout my life. I'm willing to vouch for an individual. it doesn't have to be a major connection. I want to vouch for you because you're asking for this help. So, when those instances happen, it goes to another level of compassion, and to see if we can exhaust everything we have. And Mariana, go to Tyler with all the expertise Tyler got. If we can't get past Tyler, he'll reach out to do more if there's more to be done. So we come across those situations by having compassion, understanding, listening, and doing everything we can to make this happen. Whether it happens or not, they trust and believe we did everything we can. And 90% of the time we give them the resources, but that small percentage we're unable to. And then I talk to my upper management, and they give us options of what we need to do next. So those happens, but it's the compassion and the understanding that goes to another level with our team.
Yeah. I think Billy mentioned it a little bit, but a lot of times it's a connections gap. That person needs to be connected to a service that can provide a little bit more in-depth help. But sometimes it is a services gap. Like that thing just doesn't really exist very well in our community. And that's when it usually does escalate to a conversation with me and other service providers and thinking, okay, why does this gap exist? Are there ways as a community that we can start to pull these resources together so that people aren't falling through that gap?
Well, and we talked a little bit, Billy, you brought it up about technology and, sometimes the challenges that residents have really embracing the way the world is going digital. Are there other particular content areas that we're trying to educate residents about? Someone asked about financial literacy, that or anything else. Are there particular areas of content that y'all work on?
Well, I try to get agencies to come in and work with our residents because, again, this technology gap is the biggest one. So we have some resources that's willing to come to our community room and get 2 residents at a time because we have 2 computers and go over the one-on-ones, because the majority of the residents, it's a one-on-one thing. It's that time and compassion again. And if you spend that time and compassion with the one-on-one on how to do it and not yell at them and beat it in their head, they pick it up. So it's the compassion, because most of the time the resources, they're almost at our fingertip, but it's how we represent or how we bring these resources to our residents. But again, we seek outside help when needed for those barriers like that. And they do come out and they do work with our residents. Again, once the residents get this information, they do come down and pay their rent online. They know how to do the work orders now. It's getting the residents to trust us that this is the right thing to do. This is, again, I like when they shake the keys, then they go to the office with me. It's almost like selling a car. The deal was done at 11 o'clock, but you're not leaving till 3. So I like to get them in and show them the rent help right at the introductory level. Show them this right at the introductory level, even if it takes a little bit more time, because, you raise a person or, a child as way as he should go. And then when he grow up, he won't forget it. That also works for adults too. So you bring them in and show them this is how it's done. There's a great chance that they'll follow through for the next time.
Yeah. A couple other kind of education pieces that I definitely want to talk about. Number one, I think people make a lot of assumptions about people living in affordable housing. And oftentimes they assume that they don't know how to do XYZ. We have some incredibly capable, smart, resourceful, efficient people living in our Aon properties that I would put up against anybody in our community. And so I think a lot of times it's just listening to what residents are telling us they need. Because oftentimes residents will tell us what resources they need to be available. And then the other thing that I think I'm really excited about is a couple months ago, we had education workshop on storytelling. So a lot of our residents in Aon properties have some really amazing stories about how they've overcome adversity, how they've dealt with challenges in their lives. And so one of the things that we're trying to do is equip those residents to go and share that story and advocate for themselves and advocate for their friends about what it is that they need and how we need to improve systems to make our communities better. And so that's another piece that we're really trying to tie into this beyond just the practical education of technology and finance and all these other things, but how do we equip you as an advocate in your own right to step out and tell your story so that we can change our systems.
Very cool. All right. Tyler, I'm going to go back to you. You said that you came to Aon from an organization in Oklahoma, and that we have a lot more subsidy options here in Minnesota.
Sure.
Can you talk about other differences you're seeing in the affordable housing environment here versus Oklahoma?
Sure. Just in the affordable, it's colder. So that's one thing. Yeah, I worked with a lot of for-profit landlords in Oklahoma. We didn't have just a ton of nonprofit affordable housing like we have here. There were one or two providers who were close partners of mine. But I would say that landscape is a lot bigger here in Minnesota, which is exciting. There's also, I think, to the credit of this community, been a real focus on preserving affordable housing. The environment that I'm coming from, we were certainly in a housing crisis, and it was not getting better anytime soon because there was not a focus on preserving naturally occurring affordable housing like there has been in the Twin Cities area. And I think part of that just comes from a larger population. When you've got all this land that you're looking around and looking at, it doesn't seem like you're going to run into a housing crisis anytime soon, but we all know that that's not true. So I think that there certainly is a better community focus on it, but I think there's still this huge need to increase the amount of affordable housing we have in our community and make sure that we're preserving affordable housing and that it doesn't disappear. So I think I'm excited to be a part of Aon, which is at the very front edge of that. But I'm also, excited to be in a community where that is a focus.
Very cool. Thank you.
And I think encouraging a lot of the problems that we've talked about on this call about, gaps in services and issues coming out of the pandemic, those exist everywhere. I was coming from an environment where those existed. Those exist here. I think it's not something that we can look to a specific city and say, oh, they've got it figured out. Everyone's kind of coming to this game at the same time. So that's encouraging. There's a lot of room for innovation right now. And I think we're excited to try some new things.
Very cool. Billy, what have you learned while working at Aon? You've been with us for a little while now.
Well, I've learned a lot, actually. Again, coming off a heroin addiction when I first was introduced to Aon, I stayed in one of Aon properties when I was struggling. I got the job at Jimmy John's. It made me a stronger person. This is not just about, helping, others. It's about helping me too. I was able to grow, or I am able to grow being part of a company that supports me, that understand people go through a lot, and, to really say it's going to be okay, stand behind your decisions, call you out when they're bad decisions. These are growth processes that, not only, you want more than just the work. You want to be able to grow in life, so the things that I'm gaining and use, that I'm getting here, I'm able to take it to my community. I'm able to use this outside of Aon, and it's made a better person out of me. And, I'm able to understand some of the needs of the residents because, I am the residents that we serve. I know what it's like to, for you to go through these things. I get it. The security in the buildings, I understand. I go through the same thing myself, but I still encourage them, hey, walk up and down your building every now and then. I do my building. I walk around my building. We can't really depend on just one thing, as a property. This is a community. So, I've learned that, we are better together. I actually learned that here, and with the support of staff over the years, before I started working for Aon, I was, the bricks and mortar 2015 and doing the, little Jimmy John things that just made me so happy to be able to bring samples. So it made a better person out of me. I've grown and matured a lot being here. So for that, I'm grateful.
That's wonderful, Billy. And for those who don't know what what Billy's referencing, before he joined our team at Aon, he worked at Jimmy John's and he used to bring us samples all the time. And while I'm so excited he works with us now, it's definitely better. I do miss the sandwiches. Free sandwiches were nice. Okay, Tyler, same question to you, and we're wrapping up our time. What have you learned? You've been here a little bit shorter time. What would you say you've learned so far?
Yeah. This was a surprise question. Yeah, coming into an organization that already has programs existing. I've done a lot of work building out new programs and kind of, creating things from scratch, especially during the pandemic. And so this has been interesting to kind of step in and work with the resident services staff and staff in other departments on like what's working and what do we need to tweak and what opportunities can we look for. So I think for me, it's been a growth moment of really trying to understand what Aon does really well, which is a lot of things, and then also try to understand like, okay, where are those aspects that we can improve, and then really like focus on the moment and the energy that we have to kind of push that forward. And so I've learned a lot of kind of that discernment space. And I think the resident services staff, Billy, Marianne, others have really helped me with that, of kind of understanding, hey, this is working well, this is what we need to change.
That's awesome. Well, we're running down on time, and I know the team on the back end is going to be mad because I have one more question. So Billy, you have to be sort of quick, but you're the one working directly with Aon's amazing residents who, as Tyler mentioned before, they have so much resilience and great stories, and they've overcome a lot, many of them. What would you say is the best part of your job?
The best part of my job is to see, this resident go from this thing that they were struggling, and to be at this point to where they not only got through it, they're able to share this message that I was able to witness a couple of times. They're able to share it. They're able to help somebody else in that process and move forward and do great things. So it's when a resident comes and they be in a shape that's not too good, and then they just follow every little right thing to do and just be successful. Then you see them out helping people in the community, and then they call you back. They want to help, volunteer. I've seen that 100 times, and every time I see it, I just do this dance. I'm not gonna stand up and do it, but it gives me excitement, to see a successful resident.
That's awesome. And what a great note to end on. Billy, I know those residents are very fortunate to have you in their lives, supporting them
Likewise.
and cheering them on as they make those successes that they work so hard to make. So that's awesome. All right, folks, I'm going to close us out. We're at the end of this time together. Tyler and Billy, thank you so much for your thoughtful responses. I'm sure everyone who was able to join us has learned a lot more about our programming. And to those of you who could be here, thank you for your questions. Your support of Aon and curiosity about our work and belief in the need for affordable homes is critical for our community. So thank you. Course, as I've mentioned before, we always need your support. You can give it right now at aon.org/donate. And as a special note, gifts made today are actually going to support the work of our Resident Connections team specifically, which of course we've been talking about this whole hour. And excitingly, we have just opened up a match for Give to the Max Day, which is later in November, but we've gone ahead and our generous donor Hammernex has opened that up now. So if you make a gift, we'll match it dollar for dollar. So your generosity will go twice as far. With that said, you can make your donation right now, and that's all we have for you today. Thank you so much for joining us, and have a great afternoon. Bye, everyone.